I think it's an all developers audience, so there's not so much marketing fluff from my side. Actually, I forgot about it. So I'm from IBM iX, and we're formerly known as Aperto until 2006 or something like that. We got about 20 Magnolia developers, and some of them already for, I think, 20 years or something like that. So we're a partner of the first day, something like that. I myself, I'm a computer scientist, Informatica. I did Java programming in the past, and I'm a Magnolia solution architect since 15 years. All right, so how to sleep better at night with, and that's kind of trying to make a story of some really dry stuff here, like a JUnit5 extension and Magnolia-Reproducer, which is actually, both of them are open source projects on GitHub that you can use right now if you like. So what's the story? That's what we want to be like when we deploy our software. When we develop it, we want to have a well-deserved sleep at night. And this is coming from experiences with some high security project for the EU Commission. And they have really crazy security requirements, right? And there were occasions where my sleep wasn't all the best, and that's where this comes from, because what can happen that would disturb your sleep at night? I think my configuration is not working. It turns out only at runtime, because that's how it is with Magnolia at the moment. And all those crazy security requirements that we have in our project, they of course all depend on Magnolia config working, and also it's a very dysfunctional, huge project which is totally top-down, like from somewhere in the past, with the QA somewhere way down the deployment pipeline and stuff. And also, I don't want to be responsible for any security breaches in that project, please. So what can we do about it? Hello? Oh. So, what's the problem? The problem is that a big part of our code is configuration of some kind, like YAML or XML or decorator YAML or JCR bootstrap files and all kinds of stuff which isn't really Java code, which we could test in a JUnit test. So, how do you JUnit test that the configuration that you are writing is interpreted by Magnolia in the way you meant it to be? You only know this when you, when you start Magnolia. And there's currently no way to find it out whether Magnolia does that. If your configuration code does work. Because all that configuration, and we've got lots of many syntaxes for configuration and configuration sources, and essentially that's serialized Java object states. You're writing class names in it, field names, and then values, and you have no clue. You have no, like a compiler, there's no compiler telling you this field name doesn't exist, or that class name, and this is the wrong type for this kind of field, and all that. All kinds of things can go wrong. So and that's not the only problem. There's also a number of other factors that come into play with Magnolia configuration. It's not only like serialized Java object state that comes into play, but it's also Turing complete code. It's like your, for example, module version handlers, which don't necessarily need to be only yours. It can be other people's version handlers. And they are writing config into JCR, and theoretically there could be an if that makes this work only on Mondays. And you have to, and that's the problem with Turing complete code. If it's just declarative, if it would be just declarative, you wouldn't have those kinds of problems. You just couldn't have them. But it's really Java code that writes the config into JCR. And also, depending on what version of your app you had deployed last, on which environment, there could be different state in the JCR that the module version handlers will find, and depending on that state, doing different kind of things. So you're kind of having bad sleep because am I really sure that this module version handler, which looks at that version, really does the right thing when it finds this and that? And could there be a combination of things happening that it will do something entirely different? And also there's those module dependencies. So when there's two modules writing to the same place in the configuration, it depends on your module dependency tree, which one wins, because they all want to write at the same place, and what was it? I think the last one wins. So the higher up in the dependency hierarchy you are, the better your chances are you win. But if somebody else is importing your module as a dependency, they win. And which you end up at runtime, you only know at runtime, right? And now you may say, isn't it like this everywhere? I mean, probably in other content management systems it is like that. I'm not entirely sure because, of course, I only work with Magnolia. Sure. But there is, for example, Quarkus, and it's not like this with Quarkus, because in a Quarkus test, when you annotate your test class with Quarkus test, somehow you can have an object injected which results from the configuration that you have in your project. I mean, that's great. It's like, I don't know, you can get a site config injected and then test whether the site configuration is as you expect it to be. How the hell do they do this? And the answer is, of course, pretty simple. Quarkus simply starts your application at build time. That's what it does. And because Quarkus is so fast in starting up applications, chances are you don't really notice. But that kind of makes you think, what could we do with Magnolia here, maybe? What could we do? So, this is the first of the two open source projects I want to present, which has the poetic name MagnoliaTomcatExtension for JUnit5. And actually that's what it is. It's an extension for JUnit5. And what that means is you can now annotate your test. Well, you don't. We'll get to that later. What you need to annotate your test with. But what you can do now is simply. Where's that thing? You can simply ask Magnolia's component registry. Come on, give me the cache module, because I want to do some assertions on my configuration of the cache module. All right, I get the default page cache and make sure it does exist, and then I can get its cache policy, and then make sure that it has a certain class. So you can test pretty much everything that you can configure in Magnolia as long as you can get it through the Magnolia component registry, right? And that's, I mean, at some point maybe we could write something that you can even have it injected. We didn't do this yet, but that could be a new feature for this JUnit5 extension, to do it like that. And of course, you can also do things like write rest assured tests, like send requests instead of grabbing into the guts of your Magnolia and getting beans from it. You could, of course, also send requests to your Magnolia. And you can also test things like log in, log out in your admin central if you have some customization of that. And we had lots of customization. And we also had fancy security features like you, as an editor, you can only have a singleton session. You can only log in once in a browser, and if you open a second browser, you're not allowed to log in anymore because you still have a session open. How the hell do you test that the session timeout works? Because we don't want to log them out. Like when the user closes the browser, after 15 minutes, he should be able to log in again. How do you test that, right? And you can test this because that this extension supports it. You can, or Tomcat embedded supports it. You can set the session timeout to, I don't know, a couple of seconds or something like that, and within your test you can have the session logout, the session timeout. And also things like logging tests, because we have very hard. We heard that for the observability stuff, that there are requirements for what you log, and we have a lot of requirements what we have to log, and how do you test that? In running Magnolia, then you can have a test appender, and simply after doing some requests, you expect certain things to be logged in the log, and you can test it with a test appender, stuff like that. So lots of more yummy Java code. We didn't have so much today, I think. So, as I said, you can test anything that you can reach from the Magnolia component registry. But this is kind of like looking from the back, whereas before you were looking from the front. You put things into the registry and pull them out of there, but how do you get to, for example, the filter chain? Maybe Magnolia team now knows better. I didn't find a way of getting the filter chain as a component. So what I did, I looked into, well, we will see later how we got there. So this is an example of a filter test. Like, give me the root filter. Now give me the first one, the filter chain. Then this should be of type content type filter, and give me the voters. So we can check for a voter to be present. Okay, and it should have this class. All right. But now that we have a voter object, we can actually ask it to vote. We can ask it to vote, and this particular voter. I just took anything I saw on the admin central. I saw this request going in, and it should vote on this with a true, and I can actually test this. So, and I mean, voter configuration is really, really tricky, because you can have constructs like and or and like with brackets and stuff like that, and you can have lots of fun with that, and you only know if it works if you run requests against it, right? And yeah, you can also test parts of your voters or individual ones, whatever you want, whatever you like, right? So when I said it's a bit unexpected detective work sometimes, because when you want to access things which aren't directly accessible as Magnolia components, how do you get to the filter chain, right? So I thought like, okay, I've got my web XML as the most outer code that has to do with it in my web XML. I've got the Magnolia main filter. Then I looked into the Magnolia main filter. We got something called a filter manager, and let's get the filter manager. And then I found out in the debugger, okay, when I do this, okay, I've got my MGL filter. This is maybe the root, and there's 22 filters in there. This looks like my filter chain, right? And number one, I mean, the second one is the one I want to test, so let's take that one. And of course, we're doing a lot of assumptions on what Magnolia does here. Where is it? Sorry. So, what I tried to do was, when I'm doing those assumptions on how Magnolia does things, like it has this content type filter as the second one in the chain, I try to output this as an error if that changes, if my assumption about Magnolia changes, because we're really starting to depend on internal implementation details of Magnolia, but what can you do? All right, so how to use this? I think Magnolia will provide the slides afterwards, so you got something to click on. This is the link to the repository on GitHub. It's all under the IBM, was it namespace organization, right? There you will find how to use this, like which Maven dependency to use and what you need to provide. I will get to more details there. So you can read it up yourself. And there is some example tests which are interesting, like the filter test. I did this on a branch yesterday, so it will turn up in the main branch later. but there you will find, for example, the filter test. So you can reuse that detector work that I did for this conference, actually. All right, so what do you have to do? Simply annotate your test class with this, extend with Magnolia Tomcat extension, and that's all you need within your, and you have to do it within your web app module. That's the only kind of constraint. And you don't want to have too many of these tests because, of course, each time they run, a Magnolia is started up, and depending on what you have in your Magnolia, this can take some time, and it starts up with an empty repository using RAM, Jackrabbit in RAM, not on the file system. And you can select which Magnolia profile or instance type or stage that is by providing parameters to this annotation, like Magnolia config selector. Then you tell it, effectively you tell it which Magnolia properties files will be read that you have in your project. And if you have some custom properties that you need to set, then you need to implement a certain interface. Maybe there's a more elegant way, but to do this in a JUnit5 extension, but that's how I did it. So you can do things like, you return a map and you define your system property and set its value. And then Magnolia Tomcat will use this as a system property when it starts up. All right. You can also run it in your IDE. So this is an example for Eclipse. What you need to do is, it needs to know the name of your web app, because at least I don't know of any way to automatically determine this, because maybe it's buried in your Maven POM XML somewhere. And this is how you provide the name to the Tomcat extension. You define a system property, so you have to set this as a VM argument. This is how you tell it, and if you don't, then it tells you that it needs it. All right, this is the usual problem you can get there. So give me a second. Where are we? So we have our test here, and let's run it. Where's the console? Okay. Now we see Magnolia starting up as expected, and then this is going to take about maybe 30 seconds or so. So please bear with me and blame Magnolia for it starting so slow. I can also imagine some flame graphs that will help here. There's a test running still. Oh, that's, well, live demo. There's a test still running somewhere. Sorry about that. Not sure where it's running. Ah, maybe. Okay, I think I know what it is. Do it again. Sorry about that. I still had a container running with the same port. Now it should work. So, just to spend the time in a useful way, let's look at the source code. So we're using a embedded Tomcat, and there we see it's finished in 24 seconds. I think that's fair enough. It's a small project anyway, not much modules, not many modules in it. And let's get to the point where it gets interesting. So what are we doing? Every test is running in its own directory, so we don't have any leftovers from previous test runs. And this is actually the most interesting part, because when you use embedded Tomcat and run it as a Surefire test, then you have two class loaders, one for Surefire, one for your web application, and that gets all kinds of confusions when you try to access the component registry from a different class loader. So what I'm doing here, and luckily this is what Tomcat Embedded allows. It allows to set a custom class loader, and I'm using the class row of the extension itself, and that works. And there's some other peculiar technical details, but that was the largest obstacle for me to get this to work, to get rid of all those weird class cast exceptions and God knows what. All right. Okay. That's for this one, for the JUnit extension. Let's get to something else, which might also hinder you from sleeping, which is when you think you discovered such a huge Magnolia bug. Like the one, actually that one sat on my hand one day, and what you end up with, as long as Magnolia cannot reproduce it, is maybe tickets going back and forth. I broke a record for our company, which is like 70 times the ticket goes back and forth. And it's a bit like on the left-hand side, there is somebody wrong on the internet. It says 21 minutes for me. Well, okay. This is where Magnolia-Reproducer can come in handy. And it includes also a Docker, a build for a Docker image. And what it does, I mean, as a developer, you know, as long as you cannot reproduce a bug, you cannot fix it. It might not even exist. So if you believe you found a Magnolia bug, good luck if it's not reproducible. It may take 70 times the ticket going back and forth. And isn't that a lovely bug? And this is where Magnolia-Reproducer helps. What I did, I generated a vanilla Magnolia project from the archetype, a community edition project, and also integrated our test JUnit5 extension to make it easier to, well, test. And from this, I mean, it's a GitHub repository, and where you can add your code that triggers the bug. And if you're lucky, you don't need you have a clue what you need to make it reproducible. And of course, you've got to take the time to do this, to add your code to the vanilla Magnolia to make it reproducible. But that may be more worthwhile than playing ping pong the whole day in the issue. And the build results in a web app that you can deploy. And also, you can build a OCI container, which contains the operating system, the JVM, Tomcat, and your web app. And that's where it gets interesting, because you see part of the Docker file here. So what we are using is the standard Tomcat image and as a base image, and of course you can use your own base image, whatever you use, and then you can build it. And when you do this, you include all those versions, the operating system version, Java JVM version, Tomcat version, Magnolia version, because it can depend on any of these. And support can always say, we cannot reproduce it, and you don't know why, and maybe it's the JVM minor version, something like that. And so you can nail it down exactly to what you're using to see the bug. And so you can nail it down reproducibly, hopefully. So what you can do is fork the repository, add your code, send it over to Magnolia, and then relax. Hopefully, well, whatever comes out of it, they may say it's a desired behavior. They might say it's not a bug. It's a feature, of course. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think those 5 minutes are over now that you showed me. Yeah.
According to the specs, is it possible to use the reflection API, the Java reflection API?
I guess so. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to use it.
Okay. Are there some advantages?
Advantages?
Yes.
Of using it?
Yes.
It's
associated with runtime, with compiling.
Well, it's not a native Graal VM image, right? Mm-hmm. It's a Docker image. Okay. It's just an open container, whatever the I is. Okay, it's nothing. It's got nothing to do with GraalVM native images where you cannot do reflection or something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think QA is open.
Is that it? Yeah? All right. No, that's good. You can keep the mic. Thanks so much, Jörg. Really, really cool. Really cool. So we have opportunity for questions. Any other questions? I would have one question, Jörg. Have you used the reproducer with the Magnolia support team so far?
Yes, I did. And I'm relaxedly waiting for the answer.
I can see that you're relaxed.
I've heard of them for like 1.5 weeks.
Okay. Well, from my side, looking at that and how you talk about nailing it down, I would just invite everybody to please use this project from our support's sake. I think it looks great.
Well.
Absolutely.
We had a screen sharing session.
Yeah.
They said, oh, the build is really fast, and building the Docker image is also very fast. So
hey,
if they're lucky, they can reproduce within minutes.
Yeah.
If you take the time to
exactly
create this reproducer, then they take only 5 minutes to decide, oh, not for me, it's for the Magnolia development team. Right?
Absolutely. No, sometimes that's such a challenge for us. We really spend a lot of time to reproduce something. So if we would have it in a container, that would be a giant help. So use this, please. All right. Thanks so much, Jörg.